Okay, so I've got the instructions and I've laid out my first wooden sprue with the ribs and the keel in. So I'm going to turn to instructions 1. What you tend to get with these kits is normally becoming 3 or 4 different languages, so pretty much all we're doing is just reading the part that's in English, or obviously whatever language you speak. So pretty much all we're going to be doing really is just removing all the ribs and the keel from this wooden sprue and then kind of gluing them in. So most of these parts are actually labelled, but some of them are labelled actually on the wood itself, and then some are actually labelled off the part we're going to cut. So what I'm going to do is just kind of go over some of them and then just write the numbers on where it's not actually laser burnt in. So now I'm going to cut these parts out of the sprue. So like I say, normally I tend to use a scalpel, but when it's quite thick, this is around about a 5mm piece of wood. So normally you pretty much just go through all your scalpel blades really quick. So this time I'm actually just going to use a Stanley knife. So this is just a flip blade one, and it's a lot easier, bigger blades, so a lot easier actually just to cut the parts out with this one. So normally just get your 2 little laser lines that have not been cut. I'm just going to pop them through until you hear it pop. And then once it's popped, you know that one's free. I've already cut that one out. So all we have then just to clean up really, it's entirely up to you. I sometimes just clean up the little mark that's left from the sprue, but if you want you can entirely clean all this just using a file or a little bit of sandpaper. Okay, so I'll cut all these out and then we'll move on. Okay, so when you've cut all your parts out, they should all just look like that, and we just tend to get a couple of marks where we had to cut it off the sprue. Like I say, you can clean these up now, you can spend quite a lot of time cleaning these up, but I've just found from experience that you end up sanding them all at a later stage, so I don't tend to bother. And if anything is going to be hidden by the model when it's finished, I just don't waste my time anymore. Okay, so pretty much all we're going to do now is just follow all the numbers of the ribs, and then we're just going to fit them into the corresponding numbers on the keel. So I'm just going to be using some white glue. This is a Gorilla wood glue. This is not sponsored by them, this is my own personal choice. So I just use it all the time, it's just kind of what I prefer. So I'm going to be using that. All I do is just drop it into a little container around about 10 minutes before I start, which makes it start to go a little bit tackier. It just holds a little bit more instant. Okay, so I'm going to start by adding the number 6 rib into the number 6 slot. So all I'm going to do is paint a little bit just in the groove and then just drop the number 6 rib in. And then just take a little bit of the excess off either side. Okay, so a lot of these modern kits now become very good, so you don't have to worry about it too much so you're going to get them square, because as you can tell, these as they fit in, that's already a really nice squared piece in the case. So same again, I just fit them in and then let them dry, because when you're planking in any case you do get to tweak them a bit, so they're normally fine. So let's put the next one in, put the number 5 piece in. All you normally have to worry about is just making sure that the 2 parts are flush to each other, so it's not riding up. That's a bit extreme, but you know what I mean. You want to make sure that they all fully flush down to the keel. So all we really do now is just carry on following numbers 4, 3, 2. So I'm back this way as well, and then just fit all the ribs like that, and then we'll come back. Okay, so literally after only around about 10 minutes work, we've got all the ribs fitted, and just from experience I know all the ribs are perfectly square. You can just adjust them a touch if you need to, but I know they're absolutely fine. So what you also need to check is just that the ribs are all lining up, and you can do that just by using a little block of wood, and you can see it over the 4 ribs, and then you can see that they are lined up, and then you can try it over on different locations. I mean, some of this is going to get cut off in any case, so it's you don't have to worry about it being to the millimetre. But if you've got it almost right, that'll be fine. If it is one lower, which is normally sometimes it's just because there is a bit of backwards and forwards play on these cutouts. So say that's low. When you put that on, all you do is then just backwards that one, forward that edge up, and that'll make them all sit nice and flush. So I mean, I personally think it's more important to get them all flush along the top than it is square, but as you can see, they're already square. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to stage 2. And this is adding the strengtheners to the bow and stern. So we get 2 strengtheners for port and starboard, and for the bow and for the stern. So we get these 2 blocks, and even if it's not very clear on the instructions, all we're going to do is this block just fits in between the rib number 2 and the rib number 3. This is why it's quite important that you have got that little edge off nice and smooth, so it don't force them ribs out. And that one's just going to sit between rib number 2 and rib number 3. So in the manual it's not that clear, but from experience you know you want this reinforcing bit to kind of sit directly flush with the bottom edge of rib number 3, and then it's going to curl up towards that one. And then we get to the next part, this is part number 7, and we're going to bring them together, and you want to kind of project it that they're going to line up like that, so it's kind of following a nice curve like that. Then like I say, a lot of this will be fared away, so all we need to do is just glue them in place. Like I say, the good thing about this glue is the longer it's out, the quicker it actually gets, and it becomes like a wooden super glue. That's kind of held that straight away. So just pull that one back off. So I'm not affiliated with Gorilla Glue whatsoever. It's just my personal choice. I've never had any issues with it whatsoever. So we're going to slide that in and make sure that's flush. And then just take off all the excess. Yes. Okay, so after you've had these 2 reinforcement parts, that's how we should be looking. So then when we fare all this in, it's all going to marry up. So all we've got to do now is just repeat that on both sides, on port and starboard side, and then we'll come back. Okay, so we're moving on to stage 3 of the build, and this is going to be where we start to do the fairing. As we're taking these planks, as you can see from the kind of the midship ribs, all the planks fit nice and flush. You don't really need to fair them. But as we get into the 3 forward planks, this is when you need to start to fair them, because that plank comes across, as you can see, it's touching on that edge, but there's a gap on the back edge. As we get closer, the gap gets even wider, and then we get closer to the bow. The gap's almost barely touching. So the purpose of the fairing is, so we're going to kind of fair all these ribs in. So then when we kind of bring the planks in and we bring the planks together, they should kind of go in something like that. So you can kind of see how much of these forward first ribs need to be removed. So you can use a file or a sanding block. Recently I've been starting using these sanding sticks, and you get various ones. That's a 60 on one side and 100mm on the other side, and then we move up. That's a 600 for 1,000. That's more of a finishing one. And then we get this 240 by 400, and also it kind of covers a few ribs at the same time. So all I'm going to do now is I'm going to start to just take some of this excess material off. It only being plywood, it comes off quite easy. And you just keep on doing this procedure until it's faired and the planks really start to wrap around quite nice. So quite a long way to go. So I'll just carry on with this and then we'll come back. Okay, so after you've faired all the hull, we should be looking something like that, where it's pretty much the first three ribs are all tapering towards the bow and the stern. Now that took around about 20 minutes. It was, like I say, it's just a case of just going over with different grades of sandpaper until pretty much you can smooth it all back in one continuous stroke. I say as we move up with the planking, there's still maybe a little bit more tweaking as we get higher, but you don't actually quite know until you start laying on some planks. Okay, so in the rest of the stage 3, they actually tell you to now fit the laser cut stem and stern post and a false kill. I'm actually going to leave them off. I think it's going to be easier to start getting some planks down without them on. So we're going to be moving on to stage 4. Okay, so now I'm just going to turn the body upside down. I'm going to get one of these planks, and these are the 1.5 by 7, and these have just been soaked in a little bit of water only for around about 5 minutes, so they're not excess dripping of water, but it's just enough that I can add a little bit of twist. So I'm pretty much going to add for the middle rib, which is the 2 number 6s. I just want to kind of equal this plank out all the way, so then when we get to the edges I can bend him over. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to glue it between ribs 6, 5 and 4 and not put any glue, just on 3 and 2 yet. So this glue is starting to get really tacky. It's been in this tub now for kind of 20-30 minutes getting the skin. It's all I do is peel the skin back and get the glue underneath. And all I'm going to do, just brush a bit on 6, 5 and 4 and 6, 5 and 4, going back the other way. I'm just going to lay on this plank, like I say, get it so it's kind of got a nice equal space either side of it. Can bend it, and then I'm just going to get a clamp on this far edge one. Get a clamp onto that one, and also this is where you get a really good opportunity to square up any of your ribs. And then I'm just going to get a clamp in the middle one, and that should just put enough pressure on all the rest of the ribs as well. So that's the first plank glue. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to let that dry. Because this plank's still wet, then I should just have enough where I can then turn it and then bend it to get the position I need around the stern and the stem. But the key is just to let this section dry first. Okay, so I've let this top first plank glue for around about 15 minutes. So now we can start to glue in these edges. And by having these all pinned, that's going to hold that. It's going to make that so much easier to get that natural curve. Because if that wasn't dry, or you put them on first, and that's, as you start to bend that, that's going to fight all these ribs. But like now, because that's glued and pinned, that can just be bent and formed, and we don't have to worry about it trying to twist them ribs already. So all I'm going to do is just apply plenty of glue behind this support block. Get plenty on, and then I'm going to hold it on my thumb and finger and bend it into what looks like the most natural position. The wood will find its own way, and then I'm going to get my drill. This has got a little 1.3mm drill on it, and I'm going to try and drill just into that support rib. Okay, so this time doing a little different technique. Just going to get a little cocktail stick, just going to drop that into some glue, and then I'm going to push that home. I like acts as a bit of a pin. So I'm just going to put another one in. And push that one in as well. It might just need a little bit of a clamp as well, just to get it, or because it's right on the edge, it's probably not quite got into the timber enough. So what I'll do this time, I'll just hold that with the clamp, and then I'll drill it and pin it on the next one up where I've got a little bit more wood to secure it. Just hold that with a clamp a minute. So let's move over to the stern. We'll do the same again. Bend it, let it take its own natural position, and then this time we'll just try and get it a little bit higher so it definitely goes into that support wood. Maybe try it there. So let's get the cocktail stick again. Just push that in. Just got one there, and then we'll just try it. Let's go right on this edge. The first one's always the hardest because there's not a lot of material. Yeah, it's not quite getting it like I'd like, but they'll be okay on the next ones when the bend's not quite as tight. So I think that's got it. It just needed the cocktail stick just ramming in a little bit more. And all I'm going to do is clean up a little bit of the excess glue. And then just paint on a little bit more glue to secure it. Okay, so that's the first plank on. Like I say, I'll let these dry and then I'll just snip them back like I have done, and then I'll do the next plank on the what side? I'm going to pull it's on the starboard side, and then we'll come back and we'll add the next plank. Okay, so I've added the second plank already to the side of the keel. So now I'm just going to cut off these little like cocktail stick planks. Just cut them back. They're going to fly off across the room. And then we could just take the really sharp scalpel and just trim them back a little touch. Be really careful with this because these are incredibly sharp blades. Okay, so they're nicely chopped back. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just really carefully cut this plank along this keel edge. So I'm just going to keep it nice and flat. These are incredibly sharp, these blades, so it doesn't take much cutting. Just make sure that your fingers are out of the way. and then just follow that around. And then all we do, take a little bit of sandpaper, and I'm just going to just smooth this one in a touch. And that's pretty much your first two planks. Okay, so I've added another plank to the one that we fitted right at the side of the keel. And like I say, this is kind of like an overlapping planking orientation this time. So like I say, I'll show you how to do that on the opposite side. So probably got to do, these are 7mm planks, so taking one of these 7mm planks, and what we're actually going to do this time is use a 5mm little offcut. I'm going to lie that up on the edge, and I'm going to bring this one in. I'm going to have it so it sits and overlaps around about just 2mm. So like I did before, what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue these first 6 ribs and then tack them in and then bend them in around the sides after. And this time as well, because we're overlapping, I'm just going to paint this front edge around about a mil and a half. So get that plank, I'm just going to lay it, overlap it on the one we fitted previously, and then just get that little offcut, don't need it that long, and then just drop it on until that's flush. I'm just going to hold that and then just use that drill again with a 1mm, well it's actually about 1.2, and then just drill that down. Take another one of these cocktail sticks. We'll go through quite a few of these cocktail sticks today, and then we'll push that down. Move it along, making sure it's still flush. Put one more in. And so when the cocktails obviously swell up, that's when they get in a really incredibly tight hold. But sometimes you just take a little bit, you have to be right dead on. Sometimes you take a little bit of pushing in. Just going to put a little clamp just on that front edge, and then a little clamp just on the back edge. Okay, so I'm going to put a couple more in there, and then let this dry, and then we'll come back and we'll bend this and shape this around the stem and the stern. Okay, so this second plank's now dry, so I'm just going to start just trimming back these little like cocktail stick nails. So I'm just going to cut it quite as low as possible, and then just taking my really razor sharp blade. Same again, I wouldn't recommend people doing this. I've learnt loads of control after 30 years of doing this kind of work. But yeah, anybody else I'd probably just recommend just using a sandpaper and just sanding in flush. But that gets that really nice and smooth, and you can see the little like nail head. Okay, so all I'm going to do is just trim this one like I did the other one. I'm just going to leave it a little bit longer though, and then just trim it. So I left that a little bit long because when I eventually put this little stern or stem block in, then I can then trim it back a little bit more accordingly. Okay, so that's 2 down. So pretty much all we've got to do is just pretty much repeat this process that I've done on the first 2 either side, all the way right to the top of the rib. There's only around about 7 planks to add on this one, and then we'll come back. Okay, so you can see that I've moved on quite a bit, and I've left it where it's just pretty much the final plank to add. I've got to admit, this is one tricky little build. I wouldn't recommend this to a beginner for one bit. I say a lot of it is you're going for the build where this forward rib, you start to think it's really coming too wide, but with this photo etch piece of walnut that we had later, that's absolutely fine. So why this last little bulkhead is so small, I don't know, but what I did when I started getting towards the last 2 top planks, I started to just reinforce it slightly, just so I can get the natural curve, but it's still quite a tricky little build. And okay, like I say, so I've left this top plank. I'm going to start adding this in now. So on this top plank, it's mainly going to be just a lot of pins and some clamps just to get this one really tight. So same again, we're overlapping it around about 2 mil. I'm just going to do a little score hole. And just remember not to go all the way through. And then just use my little push pin. Just push them down and move it along. Just keeping in mind of what I've actually done on one of these little reinforcement pot bars. I've actually left a little score mark, so I know that's where I need to be. Same again. Just going to paint a little bit on the forward edge. So the good thing about wooden builds is, even though sometimes when you get to this stage it looks like it's a little bit of a mess and you've lost a little bit of control of it when you start having spaces hanging up everywhere, but it doesn't take long once you kind of get it to a position that you're happy with, once you cut them back and you start to sand everything, it soon starts to come back. Let's put this next one in. Okay, so what I've been doing, like I did before when I was using these cocktail stick nails, once these are dry I'll pull these out and I'll go back over and just fill them up to make it look more like a nail. Okay, so like same again, I've got quite big hands, and as I was kind of trying pushing, maybe I think I'm actually pushing this one from this side, I actually snap that rib off, top of that rib, but I don't really need it, so I can add it on a little bit later on. I've tried to glue it on 3 or 4 times and then it just breaks off, so I can actually just, still got it, so I can actually, once all this top layer, this planking's fitted, I'll actually glue it in place so that I won't have to worry about it keep breaking off again. Let's get one more on this front edge. So these are these little micro drills, and I've actually gone through a full set on this build. So yeah, just because you can barely see that, it's like the size of a hair. Okay, so we're getting really close towards the stern, so this time what I'll do is I'll put a little bit of glue behind it again. And probably this time I might just get in there with like a peg clamp. And then that'll hold that until that dries. And then we can come in and drill it then. So I'm just going to take off a little bit of this excess. And we'll carry on. Okay, so what I've actually done with this plank, as you can see, I'll just bring you in a bit closer, is I've done a little rebate in there around about 2mm. That took quite a bit of work. So yeah, it's just with a file, just filing that all the way down. But it kind of gives you that a nice little lip, so when it goes over all this front edge, like I say, don't worry about it. If you're doing something like this for the first time, as we all know, I mean, this stage, that's why a lot of times, sometimes a lot of these kits are double planked, because the first layer of planking sometimes can look not that attractive, and then you can bring it back with your second layer. But obviously when you're doing something like this, which is a single layer, you have to try and get it a little bit more. So if you can see where I've done that little lip, that's actually just fitting over the last plank and sitting quite nice. So yeah, so a bit of labour of love, but it does make the job look a lot nicer. But it also means it's going to overlap by the correct amount that you want. Yeah, so as you're doing some of these as well, you can see when I push that into there, there's still a gap. So if I extremely push that to the rib, you can see it's making a bit of an unnatural curve. So you actually want it to find its own curve. So if you're having to push it in by that much, then it's not right. So sometimes, like I say, just go with your own discretion. This time I'm just going to put a small spacer behind it. And then when I push that in, it won't take the curve to the extreme. I'm just going to use a clamp as well, just to give it a little bit more pull. Okay, so that one's okay. I don't want to pull that one in because that one's finding its own natural curve. So all I need to do now is just bring this into the stern or the stem, which is which. I'll just mark that, and just mark that around about 2mm back. Just take my razor saw. So I'm just going to push in. So this time, just going to get your hands out of the way, and I'm just going to fit it off. I know you can't really see it that well on this one. Okay, so what I've just done then is just my hands were in the way. I've just thinned this back so it's more like a tapered edge. So then we push that forward. That'll fit nice onto that stem block. A bit more glue. And then same again, use a clamp. And just clamp that front edge in. Like I say, a lot of these now, some of them, they'll be old, just cut down to length, and some of them can be removed. Okay, so that's a tricky little bit of planking done on this this Titanic lifeboat. Like I say, all I've got to do now is just, like I say, pull these pins out, fill them with these little wooden nails, get a really good sand, and then we can kind of move on to the next stage. So the next stage will be, and then we can move on to these walnut templates. Still going to be quite tricky because these are so we've got to make sure that this hull is wrapping around these as well. So yeah, still quite a little tricky build, and there's still quite a lot to show you. So Anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to give me a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you all again soon. Take care, everyone.